This is Health Unfiltered, the podcast where we cut through the bullshit and get honest about fitness, nutrition, and mental wellness.
Hey Michael, welcome. How's it going today?
Yeah, thanks for having me. It's going well, not too bad. Rainy day today in Atlanta, but I'm about to head out then after this call and enjoy some of that rain.
Oh, nice. Yeah, it's a sunny day here in Southern California. We've also got Brandon Morris joining us here. He's out in Arizona, and Alfredo Zapata, our co-host, and he's in Mexico City. So
All
I'm
right.
super excited to get us all together today. I've really been looking forward to having this conversation around hormones, and I want to specifically focus on men's hormones and what's going on, why men's hormones, the testosterone particularly, is so low, and some natural ways we can try to increase it, and even dive into testosterone replacement. So before we get started, Michael, do you want to tell us a little about yourself so we can get to know you a little bit better?
Yeah, sure. So I used to be a professional track and field athlete back in my early 20s, and that's really when my fitness journey, I guess, started. I intermittently then abandoned fitness, well, and health for that matter, when I came to the US and after my career had ended. And assumed, the standard American diet and the standard American way of living, which wasn't so conducive to health, as I learned. And along the way, ran into some minor health issues like irritable bowel syndrome, and was injured a lot. I was sick a lot. Every time there was anywhere when we anytime we got near the cold season, I was already sick. Um, and never really thought about how my lifestyle, might contribute to all of that, until we ran into someone. At some point along the way, I met my wife, and she was diagnosed with pre-diabetes and had headaches all the time. And then we ran into a couple during a childbirth preparation class, and he was on this weird diet where he would, exclude certain food groups. It was paleo diet at the time, but I had, no idea what it really meant,
Yeah.
and thought he was nuts, and but kept listening and listening and asked questions, and along the way I'm like, you know what, I think he's onto something, and we got to do something because the way or the direction we are heading is doesn't look good, and so we made some changes. We adopted a paleo diet, and lo and behold, all of our issues went away, not overnight, but within a few weeks. And I'm like, wow, this is unbelievable. That diet can have such an impact on our health. And from there, I kept digging and asking questions and learning. And we tried keto, and then carnivore, and then animal based, and different fitness mentalities. And from there, we got into red light therapy and sauna bathing and cold plunging, and all of the things that you know um, the biohacking world talks about these days. And along the way, I really discovered that almost everything we do as modern humans is counterproductive from a health perspective. You know, from lead paint to plastic food storage containers to fragrances to anything that makes life more convenient ultimately hurts us in one way or the other. And so that really led to the realization that we gotta go back to a more ancestral approach to living. Yes, we want to use modern technology and gadgets and whatnot to kind of mitigate some of the stuff that are not easy to escape. I don't want to live in the woods, with a loincloth and, just, hunting the food and not knowing where my meal tomorrow might come from. So we
Yeah.
got to find a somewhat of a middle ground, but really dial it back way, way than, in comparison to most others in terms of, exposure to EMFs and environmental toxins and, you know, toxins in food, man-made or naturally occurring, whatever the case might be. And so that's kind of, led us to where we are today, trying to live a modern life, but based on ancestral principles, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it definitely does. It's definitely a challenge to find a balance between living the ancestral way and with
Yep.
modern technology. And yeah, I mean, you already touched on a few things. Let's get into it. Why do you think it's so common for men to have low testosterone? currently.
Yeah, I mean, there are, I'm sure, a number of reasons, but our lifestyle, I would argue, is probably the main contributor. Anything from our exposure to xenoestrogens, again, from food storage containers, personal care
Hmm.
products, food, um, to just, toxins in general. I mean, everything we do that kind of negatively impacts our metabolism, the ways our cells function, it negatively impacts our hormones, to varying degrees.
Yeah.
Sleep, obviously, lack of sleep, sleep quality is incredibly important. A lot of people don't pay much attention to sleep. They think like they can sleep when they're dead, and right now it's all about, being at work early and going home late and showing the boss that, you can work 80 hours a week and sustain it. And, a lot of the things we do, I think, are incredibly counterproductive to optimal hormone levels. Um, there is I'm sure there is some genetic component as well where our parents maybe already fucked stuff up, and
Right.
we are paying the price for that. But I do think that the epigenetics, like the layer on top of our genetics, are arguably equally or maybe even more important on hormone production. But I think specifically the lack of exercise, the lack of high intensity training, the lack of resistance training, the lack of exposing ourselves to hormetic stressors, be it cold, be it hot, be it uncomfortable situations, generally speaking. Food intake, trying to go low fat. I mean, we've probably
Hmm.
all been or had a phase in our lives where we try to be low fat because saturated fat, and cholesterol are so bad for our health, and we didn't know any better, and we just followed, mainstream advice. Reducing our protein intake, reducing, our intake of animal foods, generally speaking, in favor of plant foods, and in favor of, margarine instead of butter. All of those things that we've done, or that I've done, along the way during certain phases of my life, have, I'm sure, contributed to less than ideal, hormone levels, and testosterone being obviously an important one, specifically for men, also for women, but specifically for men, because you can tell if you're low in testosterone, your drive to, or your desire to do hard things diminishes, and that's a problem. If you're already, low in testosterone, and the the prescription is to work out more, to expose yourself to the cold, to expose yourself to the hot, and you just don't feel like it because you don't have to drive,
Right.
it's a problem, because you stay away from all of the things that you're supposed to be doing to fix the problem, and so it's kind of for some people, it might actually help to do something on a, from a pharmaceutical perspective, to get like over that hump, to start doing hard things again, and then taper it off, and and just gain the benefits from having made those lifestyle choices or changes.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. That's quite a lot. I mean, one thing you didn't mention was soy. I've heard that the way soy can affect your body, um, can release more estrogen, and there's soy in everything right now. It's really hard to avoid. I try to avoid
Right.
it.
Yeah. I mean, soy is obviously one prime example, but there are a lot of, phytoestrogens in different, plants. But also, I think more so than in food, it's probably personal care products and food storage containers, and in those things we don't really think about in terms of being hormone disruptors. But the lotion you might put on, the sunscreen you put on, the
Mm,
deodorants,
The clothes.
the clothes you wear, the
yeah,
candles you burn, to have a fresh smell at home, all of the things, or many of the things, unless you know what to buy and what to stay away from, are endocrine disrupting, right? And if you get all of that combined, the food, the deodorant, the personal care products, the creams, the lotions, the soap, all of that combined, it just hammers your endocrine system. And then it's not really a surprise. And that's particularly true, I think, more so with kids, because the damage, they're way more sensitive than we adults maybe. And you know, if you go to the pool in summer, our kids are the only ones without sunscreen. Everyone else gets sprayed and, whatnot, before they even get exposed to any sun, so there's the sun blocked completely. And obviously sun is an important aspect of hormone production as well. Not only vitamin D, which is a hormone, but also testosterone. You know, all of those things are important. And so if we almost, it's almost like we do everything we possibly can wrong, you know.
Right.
And starting with kids already, you know, and once, you know, the endocrine system of kids is damaged, you know, not all of that might completely recover, you know, which might explain why some people, despite doing everything right, still don't get to optimal levels, you know, as far as testosterone is concerned, or other hormones for that matter.
Yeah.
I think one of the
Yeah.
hardest things about being out here is something that, because we're constantly in this battle with, hormones and our whole body health, basically, where on one side you have these corporations where their objective is to make profits.
Right.
And, a lot of these corporations are immensely powerful as well in terms of regulation and advertisement and the messages that we receive, especially from a young age. And then, you have these environmental and physical factors from things that we actively choose to do. So we choose to go to McDonald's, or we choose to have the polyester clothing, or we choose to put on sunscreen, and a lot, these both kind of compound each other a little bit to where, it's like you had mentioned the low fat diets. I remember buying margarine at one point being like, yeah, I'm making a, better choice for my life. And now it's like, I look at almond milk and I'm like,
Right.
dude, it's just like not great for you.
Uh,
Like that is so
yeah.
bad.
Yeah.
And
We
so I think a lot of it is that information, like the
yes.
more we can get that information out there, the more people kind of realize like, hey, the almost every company in the grocery store doesn't have a vested interest in you being healthy. Like they have a vested interest in you buying this product.
Right.
Like
Yeah.
that's what they care about.
Yeah. And that's even unfortunately, you know, true, even though I refuse to believe that most medical professionals, you know, do harm on purpose. I mean, they are not supposed to do any harm, you know, they are supposed to do good. But if you think about it, if you're perfectly healthy, you know, doctor's not going to make any money with you, you know. Um, so it's in their interest, in their financial interest to treat symptoms and have you come back as a recurring customer, you know. And that's a problem, you know.
And man, and to
It's a
go even
shame.
deeper on that, the pharmaceutical companies are the ones that fund the hospitals that train the
Right.
doctors.
Yeah.
And so this doctor, even though they may believe that they're making the best choice, they've already been indoctrinated by the
Mm,
pharmaceutical industry. And so they're going to give you that prescription because they believe that that's the best, path for you when it's not even close to the best path,
right.
And then on top of that, yes, they're also getting incentivized, especially when you look at like the bigger treatments like chemotherapy and stuff that cost, tens and twenties, tens of thousands of dollars is these doctors end up getting, it's almost like they're salesmen a little bit, like they
Right.
make a cut from that, and so yeah, I don't think any of them are doing it on purpose necessarily, but we've definitely shaped our whole society around, money and so that's just kind of like the consequence we have now is, our pharmaceutical industry has shaped our food industry and our hospitals, the way we think about pain, pretty much everything.
Yeah. Yeah. That's
Definitely.
absolutely true.
I think coming from a Latin background and living in Mexico and then living in U.S., I think the mindset is being transformed over the years. And like you were mentioning about how the caveman was healthier because he was looking to be in the constant move and always looking to preserve the life. And I think now with all the corporations and like you said, technology has been in some way changing the subconscious mind. Even though you know what to do, you don't do it because you already had from generations in the past already transformed the way you're thinking. And talking about medical profession, I think ethic, but also has to do with how the mindset. In UCLA, my kids were born, and when we went to the OBG doctor, we find the best because we thought it's the first child, and then the second one. But the first one, when we met that profession doctor, I shook the hand, and the nicotine smell just came into my nose, and I said, "Wow, she's the top specialist." And we didn't have a chance to look for another one, but it did well. My son was born and everything, but I feel like a very controversial thing because I said, well, she's a professional, she's caring for the life of the women, and then what kind of lifestyle did she have?
Hmm.
So
Yeah.
I asked her, I asked her, "How's your lifestyle?" Because I told her, "Well, I'm a fitness trainer, I'm a nutritionist." And she said, "Well, I'm doing well. I have a horse and I run a horse." And I said, "Well," and then you see the skin of the person. She was very pale, and I said, "Well, that's pretty sad." And I said, "Well, I don't want to do anything to do with the corporate medicine. I'm gonna be more natural." And I've been searching, over the past 30 years, working with people who started from the ground in terms of preserving your health and looking like the ways you're doing things, which I think is very commendable, and putting a unity to really spread that to the people who are ready. Because I think we all are ready, but we don't have the timing to make a choice because we're bombarded with so many things around us unless we get out of the box and we say, forget it. If you don't want to talk to me, I don't care. I want to be with the people like minded to make this a crusade on my own. And then I can share it with the people who are ready, but not to kind of push it like, bombarded promotions and things because people are not going to get it.
Right.
Yeah,
Yeah, that's absolutely
definitely.
true. And one thing that I've noticed as well is that there are a lot of people who have realized that the way things are not right, but they're afraid to be the ones that stick out like a sore thumb if they do something differently, right? And so I've noticed that, if people see us doing things differently and being like the odd ones out, then more and more say, you know what, I'm okay aligning with them because I'm not the first one. I'm not the only one, and that's really, I think, an important aspect of showing how it's supposed to be done and having people look up to you and say, what do you do? Because I want to, I don't know, be as fit as you, be as healthy as you, be as, whatever the case might be, to be a role model. And instead of, as you said, pushing your agenda because nobody wants to be told what to do, just leading by example and then, opening the conversation. Or, if someone asks, say, well, this is what I do and this is why I do it. And, don't, if you feel the same way, don't feel like you're the only one, because there are a lot of people who already have made who've already discovered that, things aren't right. They're just afraid to do anything differently, because it's, yeah, not everyone is cut out um, to be the odd man out,
Yeah. I
It's kind
mean,
of
it's
funny. This whole
scary.
conversation's kind of drifted towards like how to get people in your life to make better choices because this is really hard, and a lot of times, like just like you said, people don't want to be the pioneer. And so what I
Mhm.
normally do is I try to talk to people about like, the energy levels. That's a big one. And so it's really common, especially it's kind of a joke where people just see themselves as being tired all the time. And it's like, all right, well, that's actually a byproduct of the way that you're choosing to live your life. And a lot of that is food. Like I'd
Mhm.
even dare to say like 80% of that is probably food, because you get into these diets where you're constantly eating processed foods and it's not just your hormones, it's literally everything. Like your body is in warfare basically against these chemicals because especially here in America where we really don't ban a whole lot of additives and stuff, like a lot of this stuff is killing you.
Yeah.
And it's like, so we're getting an immune response from it. It's having a host of negative effects. We're malnourished in a lot of areas. And, and so it's kind of tough. But once you start talking to people about, hey, once you start going cleaner, like your energy levels, your clarity, like you start to feel better, you start to sleep less, you actually get to a point where you're not tired. Like
Mhm.
it is possible. And so I think talking about those things, it kind of, puts the thin side of the wedge and where you're like, change is possible. Like it can happen.
Yeah. It's really scary for people. I mean, I'm so glad that all of us were able to come here today and really set the tone for the new normal and try to bring this out in the public. It's really hard, especially for guys, to talk about having low testosterone. And it's something that I've been dealing with for a few years now. My testosterone is on the lower end of the scale. It's not completely in the tank, but I definitely feel like I could benefit from increasing it. And I've been doing a lot of things over the years. We'll get into more of that in a little bit. But I really haven't seen a big improvement.
Hey, give me
And
a second, guys.
sure. And I know, Michael, I think you've dealt with that in the past. Do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, so I never really paid much attention to my testosterone levels. It wasn't really ever a part of my regular blood work that I would do, once a year, at least here in the US. But one thing, maybe to preface this a little bit, when I was an athlete, um, I was never the most talented runner or sprinter for that matter, but through hard work and dedication, I made it, to the European Championships and was the Austrian champion twice. And I realized there are some people who are just so much better and can work out so much more. And I'm like, I know that I'm not the most talented athlete, but there is just a huge discrepancy between what I can do and what others can do. And I noticed this most specifically at the under 19 European Championships in Italy in 2001. There was a guy, I came in the fifth over the 100 meters, and the guy who I beat by just a thousandth of a second, it was like a photo finish kind of thing, was a guy from France. And a few years later, he was in the finale of the Olympics, and he looked like 3 times the size that he looked when I ran against him and beat him. And I'm like, what the fuck? This is impossible.
Right.
I know what this guy can do. I beat him at that time, and now he's in the finale, which there is no way I could have ever made it. With or without pharmaceuticals, it doesn't matter. I'm not that good. But I know that this guy wasn't that good either.
Hmm.
And it occurred to me that, well, some people, I guess, are using testosterone or, other anabolic steroids. And in my youth at that time, I started, because I already kind of made the decision that I'm gonna, phase out. I'm gonna stop, running professionally and focus on a career in IT. And so I started experimenting with testosterone. I had no idea, no guidance. I just had a doctor who would write me a prescription, but I knew
Hmm.
nothing else. And
Yeah.
so, my buddy and I, we did this for a while, and we noticed, well, we get stronger, but we're not gonna be Olympic champion material either. So we, abandoned the idea, and that was that.
Were those
But
injectables that you were doing,
yeah, it
or?
was, just plain old testosterone propionate, I think it was. It's like a
Yeah.
short-lived kind of, testosterone ester. And now the main thing, looking back now, I think I might have negatively impacted my testosterone, because the thing is, with most hormones, whatever you apply exogenously, there's always a negative feedback loop in the body. So if you inject testosterone, your body stops making it because it doesn't need it,
Right.
right? It's not gonna that you get double the amount. No, you get what you inject, and that is it. Your
Yeah.
body stops producing it. And we did, play around with testosterone back in the days in my, early 20s or mid 20s for maybe a year and a half or so. And obviously, I can't prove it. I don't know for sure, but I suspect that I might have fucked something up by having my body not produce anything naturally for such a long time.
Yeah.
But after that, testosterone was never something I even thought about remotely. But then as I got into, the whole biohacking and whatnot, at some point I was like, you know what, I should actually get a testosterone panel as well. And it came back at 280, whatever
Mm.
milligrams per, I don't know what the unit is. Um, so that's on the lower end of normal, right? It's still within the
Yeah.
normal range, but it's on the lower end. And I'm like, this is not good. I mean, I should have, maybe in the 500s or so, but not 280.
And how old were you
And
at that time when you did your
uh,
first panel?
that was 5 years ago, maybe. So I was in my late 30s.
Okay. That's around
So
the
not,
time that testosterone starts to get lower, but maybe not quite that low.
well, that's what they say. There are some that argue that
Right.
it shouldn't really drop significantly at all, even if you get older, if you're, healthy. But who
Okay.
is? Who is, I mean, who is truly
Right.
healthy? Everyone has been exposed to stuff over time that is, less than ideal from a health perspective. But I'm like, okay, you know what? And at the time, then I started working with a doctor who focuses on anti-aging. So I was really on that anti-aging kind of thing, with NAD and metformin at the time and rapamycin and trying all of
Mm.
those different modalities to kind of, you know, age slower, I guess. And, his recommendation was, well, you should also consider testosterone or hormone replacement therapy to get your levels to the 800s or so. I think you would do well with it. And to me, it just made a lot of sense, right? And so, but at the same time, I'm not someone, I hate using pharmaceuticals as a band-aid instead of, understanding the root cause and fixing the problem, right? And at the same time, roughly, I discovered that we have been exposing ourselves to endocrine disruptors, every single day. And we started removing, plastic food storage containers, the whole shebang, change clothing, change personal care products, filtered our drinking water, stopped drinking from plastic bottles. We did a lot of things. And I'm like, I was convinced at the time that by fixing our exposure to endocrine disruptors, my testosterone levels would be good.
Yeah.
Right. So I'm like, you know what? I'm not going to wait for this. I'm going to do both at the same time. I'm going to cut out all the endocrine disruptors that might negatively impact. I'm going to supplement with testosterone, and then I'm going to phase out testosterone, and I'm good. So I started doing this, and unfortunately, so one of the things, as I mentioned, with testosterone is you inject it, your body stops producing. The doctor at the time said, well, if you take HCG, you keep stimulating your testes to produce testosterone at a low level, but they're never going to completely stop. And I'm like, well, makes sense. So let's do that. And the downside of HCG is super expensive. Testosterone is cheap. You can get it for $60 a month, whatever. HCG is like $250 a month, in comparison.
What is HCG?
It's a hormone basically that encourages your testes to produce testosterone. And now here is the thing, that at the time I thought, there is only one mechanism that determines how much testosterone the body produces. And then later on I learned, no, it starts in your head. The testes are one aspect, but there are several stages that, it's like a cascade of hormones that ultimately then decide how much testosterone your produces. And so going back, then I'm like, okay, so, that's why sleep is important, because there are certain processes that start already during, your restorative phases of sleep that then ultimately determine how much testosterone your testes produce. And there are stuff along the way. It's a fairly complicated, as so much in the human body, process. So it's not just one thing, but the good news is that if you make the right lifestyle choices, you hit pretty much all of them. If you sleep right, if you exercise, if, cold plunge, you hit all of them in different stages, and you should be good. And then, so, a year or so in, or I think it was actually longer, that I then was on hormone replacement therapy. I said, you know what, I'm going to stop. So I stopped cold turkey, and with both HCG as well as testosterone. And I noticed that it took half a year or even a little bit longer for my body's own production to kick back in. And I'm like, okay, this was the point where I realized this, that if you keep doing this, at some point your body might never, recover at all, and I'm like, okay, injecting testosterone is a no-go. I will never, ever do that again. And so I talked to my doctor, and he said, well, if you continue with HCG, you continue encouraging your own body to make more, until, you're back to normal, so to say. And so I've been doing this, and I've been doing more research into HCG and specifically, and the potential side effects, and the impact on the negative feedback loop and all of that. And along the way, I discovered a couple of things. One is, I will likely, regardless of what I do or what I've done so far, I don't think I get to 800 plus without using pharmaceuticals. It's just not in the cards for me. Maybe because I did something very stupid in my early 20s. Maybe is it because I've been exposed to endocrine disruptors for 3 decades in my life already? Maybe is it because my genetics? Maybe, my brother is in a kind of similar boat. He's like in the high 200s, low 300s kind of thing. So there might be a genetic factor, but the point is, I guess, that it's probably not very likely that I'll get to 800 at my age without doing something extra, So I've made the decision. I seem to be hyper responding to HCG, which means there's might be something upstream in my hormone cascade that is not working quite as well as it should, because if we do something on the testy side, my testosterone production goes up. I mean, just with relatively low levels of HCG, I get like to 1,000
Oh, wow.
total testosterone.
Wow, that's a lot.
Yes. And so, and I'm like, and I feel really good with that. And I tried again, to not do that and, just stick with my 350 or whatever, I can get to naturally. And I feel less good. I feel less motivated to push myself. I feel colder in the cold plunge. I'm more likely to stay in longer, to endure more pain. I'm more productive. I'm stronger. A lot of positive things happen if I stick it to around 1,000 or so total testosterone rather than to 350. And so that's where I'm in right now. That yes, I'm still on HCG. But one thing that is always, when people, especially in the gym, see me, like, oh, the way you look, you must be on testosterone, or whatever. And then I always pull out a picture of me doing CrossFit when I had 250 total testosterone, and I looked exactly the same. So I'm like, no, it's not necessarily my physical appearance. I've always been ripped and relatively musculous in comparison to my brother, who also does CrossFit, but who probably has this different genetics. I don't know.
Yeah.
But it's just how I feel is different, and not so much how I look, because the way I've always looked, the way I look ever since I worked out, I fortunately grow muscles relatively easy, and I have very low body fat, regardless of, obviously diet plays a role, but I have a lot of leeway that I can, do diet-wise, more carbs, less carbs, more fat, less fat, etc. I still look the same, more or less.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of, my journey and my current take on testosterone levels and on hormone replacement therapy in particular.
Yeah. I'm in, the mid 300s, and I've been trying to improve my testosterone naturally, and I've been considering taking pharmaceuticals. And so personally, I'm in the middle of my journey trying to figure out what to do. For a long few years now, I've been exercising, doing the cold plunge, getting sun, prioritizing sleep. I've even tried fenugreek and ashwagandha, and more recently, I started taking Tongat Ali with oh man, what else is in that one? It's
It was the Huberman mix or stack.
Destra androgrosa, something like that. I think
Yeah.
Huberman talked about it in one of his episodes.
I tried that too. It did not move the needle for me at all, like
Yeah,
zero.
yeah,
But and I'm like, well, maybe the plant-based approach, as funny as it sounds, might be better than the pharmaceutical-based approach. But the truth is that some of those supplements also tax the liver, so they are not harmless. No plant is. I'm like,
right.
is it, even if it had worked, is it really better in the long term? I don't know, but you mentioned cold plunging, and there are what I've learned is, if you cold plunge after a workout, which is the regimen that most people would consider kind of like as a recovery kind of
Right.
methodology, there is actually case studies that show that if you cold plunge post workout, it negatively impacts your testosterone. If you cold plunge pre-workout, like if you pre-cool, it positively impacts your testosterone. And evidently the best stack, again, that's just based on anecdotal evidence and case studies, is if you cold plunge, exercise, sauna bathe, in that order. Which is not something that I would have considered in the past, because it's kind of counterintuitive. Cooling down before working out, you usually warm up, right? Before lifting heavy or whatever. You don't want to be cold.
Really counterintuitive.
Yeah. But I've actually noticed it's not only, I haven't measured the impact on my testosterone levels, but I have noticed that when I pre-cool and then work out, my performance is significantly better. And the mechanism behind that, as far as my understanding is, and what I've read, is that one of the reasons why you fatigue when you work out is because your cells overheat, right? Your mitochondria kind of stops making energy or reduces its energy output because it runs too hot, like an engine. If the engine runs too hot, performance goes down.
It's all bad.
And the same goes with your body on a cellular level. And so if you pre-cool, you have more time before you overheat. right?
That makes
And so I've been
sense.
doing this as part of my CrossFit regimen, and I've noticed both lifting and cardio and all the metabolic conditioning. I'm just so much better because I start redlining later. And if it's only 5 minutes later into the workout, but if the workout is a 15-minute workout and I have 5 minutes longer to push it, it makes all the difference, right? And so I started
Definitely.
doing that, and then the sauna after, and that might be something for you to try. And since you're not yet on any pharmaceutical, the thing is, it's almost once you feel great and once you're at a level where you want to be, saying that, what, for the next 2 months or whatever, I'm gonna risk going back to 350. It's like, I don't really want to do this because I feel really, really good right now.
It makes it
Um,
really hard to get in that cold
yeah,
plunge when you're cold, when you don't have that
Mhm.
testosterone.
right.
But
It's funny how
yeah,
it's a lot of times it's stuff like that. Like you were talking about like the different factors and trying to solve this low testosterone issue or deficiencies in all kinds of areas in our life. A lot of it, especially with pharmaceuticals, they'll only target one area
Yeah,
and then it almost always has a knock-on effect. So like antidepressants as a good example, like yeah, it'll increase your serotonin levels and your dopamine levels or your norepinephrine, but a lot of times it can over elevate it to where it kind of can cause a mania or serotonin syndromes, and on top of the fact that it destroys your bacterial environment as well. And so it focusing on the whole body health is something that I've always tried to focus on, is like, all right, we don't want to just target one thing. We want to try to create the environment where a body will naturally elevate these levels on its own. But then even outside of that, you still have the genetic factors. Like there's just going to be maybe my father, my father's father, like maybe my whole line generation has just lower testosterone later in life, and
right.
it
Yeah,
and so there's, it's like I'm fighting Mother Nature at that point. On top of the fact that, within cities in the United States, we're constantly bombarded with radiation, like, plastics, microplastics, like so much stuff that we're just ingesting on an everyday basis. And so it's like we're just constantly fighting this stuff. That's
yes.
why it's kind of crazy, like being Alfredo being in Mexico City. So in other countries, a lot of times they're not as bombarded as we are here. And so a lot of these issues that we talk about, like in terms of malnourishment, it's a different type of malnourishment. In developing countries, when they say malnourishment, it's key vitamins like A, C, like, B12 or whatever. Well, with us, it's, key vitamins as well, but it's a lot of these, smaller things like
Hmm.
hormones or fiber, things that these other countries don't really have to worry about as much because they're worried about vitamin C or zinc or something.
Well,
You
yeah,
know,
I think part of what you mentioned, it happened probably a few decades ago because I was in LA for 20 years. When I came back in 2012, it was like if it wasn't the same like in US, it was pretty close because all the influence and it's been coming, especially from US and then Asia, because the big market and people that you can see Lamborghinis here, it's like being in Beverly Hills. And I think
Hmm.
it's been coming from the north down to Latin America, especially stopping in Mexico, where I saw living 2 decades plus in US and now coming back here. I feel like a foreigner. I feel like how am I going to get into the mode of living here? I've been here for 10 years, but I know what you said. And I think the mindset and being at peace, whether you're in US or anywhere in the world, it will help you to have a little more chance to kind of think before acting or doing something like Michael is doing, in terms of investigating, trying, and try to be not anxious or desperate, because I think sometimes that can cause us to be all over the place. And what do I do? I try all these things and didn't work, and you start getting kind of in your mind, creating a reality that yes, I know it's messed up right now, but how do we do it? If we are in peace, we can make better choices and connect with people like you guys and really make this movement more peaceful but not like aggressive, to have conscience and say, well, yeah, if I make a change on myself, I can influence others and do more and speak less, but with proof of how we live. And I think that's what I'm, working on and trying to make an impact here in Mexico and, anywhere.
Yeah, that's
Definitely.
absolutely true. It's very easy to, to get overwhelmed by everything that's going on. And, whenever, I hear someone, oh, but there's so much information, so much, it's almost impossible, to do better. Just pick something and do that better and focus on that, take the win, um, and take small steps, everything that you can, any small steps you can do today, be it, removing your phone before going to your bedroom, or not having that Starbucks Frappuccino or whatever the case might be, is already a step in the right direction. If you keep making small steps, those add up, and over time, you'll also learn how to better listen to your body, so you can tell what works and what doesn't, without having to listen to someone who might give you information that's either plain out wrong or maybe out of context, or only works for some people but not for everyone, not for you, you know. And so, I totally agree, try not to make yourself crazy. Take a breath, focus on what you have around you, focus on the present, and just, make one meaningful improvement, and take it from there. Do that again tomorrow.
Yeah, small
Maybe,
steps.
yeah, no, absolutely. Otherwise, there are some people who can jump in, head first, and make dramatic shifts in lifestyle over. I'm one of those. I like that. My wife's the complete opposite. You know, when with every change, we kind of have to approach it and like very slowly, and otherwise she gets overwhelmed and it doesn't like it. So you have to also kind of figure out what personality you are, and the people around you, because very often, especially in a family context, it doesn't really matter what you want to do, if there are other people involved who are affected by your decisions and your choices. So that's something to keep in
Definitely.
mind. Maybe one more thing,
Yeah.
because we've talked about it a lot, and some people might get confused with HCG, because we've mentioned it so much. It's usually it's that hormone is known in the realm of pregnancy, because your pregnancy tests for HCG in your urine, right?
Hmm.
But it's also a hormone that you know that impacts male health. Usually our levels are significantly different than that of females, but nonetheless, it's the pregnancy hormone, but it's also applicable in the context of raising testosterone in men.
Definitely. Yeah, and I want to kind of circle back to taking in testosterone replacement therapy. A good buddy of mine, Eric Dixon, he has a podcast, The Speaking Space, and I know he does testosterone replacement therapy, and he swears by it. He feels great when he's on it, and he says it's the best thing in the world. And I know there's definitely the concerns of your body not being able to produce it eventually after a while, after using it for a bit. But are there any other like negative side effects that you guys are aware of from using testosterone replacement therapy?
I mean, there are.
Well,
Yeah, go ahead.
yeah, I just want to share a little bit because growing up, I started practicing martial arts. I played soccer, but then in my early teens, I started getting into the bodybuilding. And here in Mexico, there was a lot of very profound interest in becoming a bodybuilder in some niches of people. So I started getting closer to some of the athletes, and just me being very questioning everything and why is this, why is that. I start asking some of the guys that were like, bulging muscles and stuff. And I was just pretty much just a practitioner of martial arts, Bruce Lee, and things like that. So I said, how can these guys get so much muscle? So I started getting close to one of the Mr. Mexicos here in Mexico, and they started giving me some tips of what they were using. And back in the day, in the late 70s, you can go to the drugstore and buy any type of testosterone replacement, DECA, uh, testosterone, anything. So I start messing up with capsules, and I start feeling changes, but not too remarkable in a way because I wasn't even 16, 17. So I felt kind of like I was just kind of going with blinds all over the place, trying things. And then I started doing a little more when I was like 18 or 20. Then I started nutrition. So I started asking some of the doctors about, like you mentioned, side effects and things like that. And I noticed some things like my endurance and my strength grew like 100%. And I was able to work out almost like those guys. But then I felt like it was too hard to keep up with that because you have to put so much food in it, and then you start having some, acne and things like that. So I kind of got off, and then when I crossed the border and I got to LA, my passion with a friend of mine was bodybuilding. So Gold Team Bennett, it was my house for like 18 years, doing personal training and getting to know the guys who were like on top of the contest. And I saw how much damage mentally, and especially the females, all the changes that we start having, trying to figure out how to be on top of the stage and win. And I guess at that point I wasn't checking my levels, but I felt like I was kind of lowering my performance. I didn't get big, I didn't compete, maybe just one time, like in Mexico. But I mentioned that because then I start feeling like something was going on with myself. Right now I'm 62, but I feel like 35 with experience. But I'm saying in terms of measuring my levels, I did a couple of years ago, and it was a bit low. But I start noticing that with age, things start kind of digressing a little bit. And a guy who does pharmaceutical for wrestlers and bodybuilders told me, well, if you go to the testosterone replacement, it might help you to standardize your levels. So I've been thinking about it, but I said, well, I think I need to be my best psychology here in the mind before even pursue something that might cause some damage later. Because now I'm healthy, quote unquote, and I feel good, but I'm not at my best. I probably lost about 10 pounds in terms of muscle, but I feel like I need to get more focus before I try something else.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and I mean, is that all those? I mean, bodybuilders are obviously I think the extreme example because they take amounts that are absolutely not healthy, regardless of how you look at it. I've known during my track career a couple of bodybuilders as well that dealt with mental health issues, obviously acne, hair loss, some started growing, breast tissue. Because the thing is, especially with testosterone, but with the other anabolic steroids as well, that typically converts to estrogen in the body then, not all of it is positive for you. The more, testosterone you have, the more you convert into estrogen. And then you need to take anti-estrogens, to kind of counter that out or try to at least. And obviously none of that is perfect because anything that you take has, as Brandon said before, not only one effect, it has a number of side effects, that might have a cascading effects that we're not even aware of yet, And so it's becomes very difficult. The more than you stack together, the more you negatively impact your body in some ways. And so I think that's one of the reasons why I would encourage or discourage everyone to just take straight on testosterone. If there is a way to encourage your body to make more of it endogenously, on the inside, I think the better it is. And one of the ways, it's probably not the only one, but one of the ways is, either with, supplements, try that out, see if that works. If that doesn't, maybe that HCG, is one way to do that. Even though there don't appear to be a lot of side effects that we know of, maybe in 10 years we find out and we're like, stupid idea. Now we know better.
Yeah.
So
I mean, we learn.
yeah, exactly. But
But
I would
my
certainly.
phone's gonna die, guys. I'm so sorry. I gotta jump out. This was a great conversation. I'm glad that we're able to talk about this. I mean, we really touched a lot of points. I really think that education is a big part of it. The more we talk about it and the more we demonstrate it to people, and the more that we can kind of, shift the narrative a bit and actually, raise awareness around some of these major problems that people face. Because a lot of times people just don't realize like why they're tired. They think, oh, I'm tired, like I didn't sleep that much. And it's like, no, even if they slept 9 or 10 hours, like they're still tired. Like their body is
Hmm.
tired.
Yeah.
And a lot of that is everything that we talked about today, like all the factors. And some of it, is out of our control, like the genetic or where we live or, the things that we're just bombarded with out of our control. But then there's still a lot of things that we can control, as
Yeah.
whether it's taking supplements or eating a more whole food based diet like paleo or something like that, or even the carnivore diet. But I'm glad that I was able to talk to you guys. I hope you guys have a good day,
Thanks,
and I'll
Brandon.
talk to you guys next time.
Thanks,
Yep.
man.
All right, bye.
Yeah, but I definitely stay away from oral steroids because they, get metabolized in the liver, so they always tax your liver. If you choose to do something, I think the injection is the way to go. And back in the days, I remember, there were like, big needles, and you need to find the right spot, and it's always like, oh, I didn't really wanna, pinch myself. But now these days, especially with HCG, but also with testosterone, you can really do it subcutaneously using an insulin needle. You don't feel it at all. You
Hmm.
don't bruise. There is not really any concerns. Everyone can do that at home. But yeah, definitely the more you can stay out of your negative feedback loop, I think the better it is. Because if you think about it, even if you feel great, that obviously that's the main goal, that you feel better. But ask yourself, do you want to do this for the rest of your life? And what happens if you have to stop in 10 years? Maybe you cannot afford it anymore. Maybe
Mm.
there are other, complications that prevent you from doing that. What then? Can you be certain that you have not permanently disabled your own production, or at least severely negatively impacted it? And if the answer to the question is no, I don't know, or I'm not sure, then I would rather think twice about that and go the safer route based on our current knowledge. And as of right now, for me, that is low dose HCG, but
Yeah.
definitely not testosterone. Of course, unless you want to be a bodybuilder, then there is, those are different choices. Then you need to make. You're doing this because you want to, win medals, and not because you want to be the healthiest you can be. Those are
Yeah.
different goals. And so, but if it's
Definitely.
for longevity, for just feeling good, for just being able to live life to the fullest, you don't need incredibly high testosterone. You just need to be in the upper range of normal,
Yeah.
aka optimal levels. That's what I would shoot for.
Definitely. We've talked a lot about HCG, but Michael, do you want to wrap up other natural ways to increase your testosterone?
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned, Tonkarali, fenugreek. There are some, ashwagandha. I think there are different ways. Huberman, I think, has a good podcast, talks about the stack that he's using. Again, some of them tax the liver, so he also cycles on and off.
Hmm.
Um, I'm not sure if he's doing testosterone replacement or hormone replacement therapy, from a pharmaceutical perspective as well. He made it very clear he is not a natural. So, he's probably doing other things as well. But again, I would start with covering your bases. If your diet is not dialed in, if you're not exercising, if you're not cold plunging, I would
Hmm.
not even think about doing anything else, because those are the foundation, right? If you don't
Yeah.
get those right, uh, don't bother with injecting anything. But if you've been doing everything else right, or at least to the best of your knowledge, you sleep good, you eat well, you exercise regularly, you expose yourself to hormetic stressors, and you still don't get to the levels that make you feel your best, then I would start considering probably the supplements first, because they are less expensive. You don't need a doctor. You can, buy them on Amazon,
Yeah.
or from, I think Huberman is working with Momentous. They have a stack that they developed in cooperation with Huberman. But you can find other sources as well. It might be less expensive.
Right.
Do that first. See if that works. If that doesn't work, consider the next step, which might be HCG, which might be, something else there. I think oral ways too, but I really prefer the twice a week, injection. It doesn't hurt, doesn't
Hmm.
tax my liver, and see, how you feel. And the very last, I mean, there are some who don't respond to HCG or to some of those other interventions quite as well. I'm fortunate enough that I do respond very well. If you don't, maybe you need to supplement with testosterone, but I would always keep in mind that, what do I need to do to keep my body encouraging making its own? Shutting it down for extended periods, for years or decades, is probably not a good idea.
Yeah. So definitely start with diet, exercise, mental health, making sure you're getting
Yeah,
a lot of sun,
yeah.
even try cold plunging.
Yeah,
Yeah,
cold
that's
plunging
really
before exercise. I
doable.
mean, cold plunge and then do, lift weights or, high intensity stuff.
Yeah.
That's gotta move the needle at least a little bit. I'd be surprised if that doesn't do anything at all.
Yeah, yeah, I've heard about it not being recommended to cold plunge after a workout, but I didn't know that correlated with testosterone. I thought it was just about muscle building. That's really
I mean,
interesting to
there's
learn.
a lot of nuance to all of that. I mean, if you're a professional CrossFit athlete and you have like 5 workouts a day, obviously you wanna, cold plunging between to kind of get your pump out and everything and to cool down
Yeah.
is a good thing. But if you're
Hmm.
just an average Joe, like, like we are, and we go to the
Right.
gym or whatever, and then we come home, maybe heat would be the better, approach to recover quicker and to help your body, build muscle tissue instead of cold. I would do the cold plunging before and then the hot or sauna, hot shower, whatever after.
Yeah. Yeah, I had one of those smaller portable saunas for a while and then I moved and I miss it. I'm gonna have to get another one because I really
Yeah.
miss the sauna.
There are a couple of very good ones that are just, one person from, I think, Thera Sage has one that you can sit in on a chair. There is one from Sunlighten, where you can kind of, slide in like a sleeping bag almost kind of thing.
Those are like
There are
the
sauna.
infrared saunas.
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
They're infrared, sauna blankets. It's not quite the same
Hmm.
thing as getting, actual, it's conduction more than radiation.
Yeah.
Um, but nonetheless, anything that you can do to heat up after a workout to, support blood flow is good. And then do cold before. And if it's only a cold shower, especially in
Hmm.
winter when the tap water is cold,
Oh
get into
yeah.
the cold water, work out, and then get hot.
Definitely. Cool. Well, is there anything else you wanted to mention about hormones that we haven't
No, I
covered
mean,
already?
yeah, no, I'm gonna do a deep dive on the exact mechanisms of testosterone production in men, like at what
Hmm.
stages in the brain and in other parts of our bodies and organs that happens, and what can go wrong in each of those stages, and what you can do to kind of fix that. There's still a whole lot of research I need to do, so that's why I haven't recorded the episode yet. But that's one of the things that I'd like to do a deep dive on the Primal Shift podcast, because it's super interesting. I didn't know that. Most people probably don't, and it kind of tells you that, well, it might be something wrong here that you can easily fix that then has downstream effects, right?
Yeah.
Um, so just more, I guess, food for thought and information that you can use to experiment, and see what works and what doesn't.
Awesome. Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned the Primal Shift podcast because I really enjoy listening and I'll keep an eye out for that episode.
All right.
Definitely. Are there uh are there any podcasts that you enjoy listening to just for entertainment purposes?
Oh man, I used to listen to it quite a bit, but I'm so busy now that I consume very little unless there is something
Mhm.
specifically I need for my research. But the problem is anytime I listen to a podcast or I go to a conference, my wife's like, oh, now he comes back home with more great ideas that we can, implement. So
Right.
I've been trying to, hold off on being bombarded with stuff. But there are one of a couple of the podcasts that I used to enjoy is, the Huberman is a good one.
Yeah.
Well, Joe Rogan, it's not only
Oh
health, but
yeah.
sometimes he has like, he had like the guy from White Oak Pastures, Harris, he had on the podcast,
Yeah.
talking about
Will
regenerative
Harris.
farming. Will Harris, and that's the one that I listen to a lot. Then the Dr. Anthony Gustin has a good podcast. He's the founder of Equip and
Yeah.
Lineage Provisions, and Saladino has a good podcast that I always has great guests and informative guests. But again, these days I barely listen to any podcasts anymore, and yeah,
Yeah, you've got a lot going on over there on the
yeah, yeah,
homestead. I
yeah.
heard you're
I
trying to raise all your own meat over there.
Yeah, yeah. That is work in progress, and between that and butchering and feeding,
Yeah, you're a busy guy. I'm
it's been
really
busy. Yeah.
really grateful for your time coming on the podcast today. I really appreciate it. I learned
I
a
appreciate
lot.
you having me.
Sure the listeners did too. And thank you, Alfredo. Thank you for joining us all the way from Mexico City.
Yeah, you're welcome. It's a pleasure to be here, and a lot of knowledge and things to get in the mind.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm gonna have to look into HCG a lot more now and really consider it. I'm probably gonna stick with the Tangat Ali and Androdoja Freguesa for a few months and take
Hmm.
another blood panel and see if that has any effect. And if not,
Yeah,
I'll probably pull the trigger on HCG. So thank you so much again. I really enjoyed it. Bye, everybody.
you're most welcome. Bye, guys.